Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 3, Episode 26, The Adversary. But before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are awesome. Now, I've been keeping you all apprised of this ongoing saga of trying to get our Twitter page back up and running again. It is still down. Something that I thought would have surely have been an easy fix is turning out to be anything but. I'm not even exactly sure what the issue is, but like sometimes when I go to log in, it's like the Fire Cave page is there. It's alive. It's well. But then when I go to actually try to post anything or make any kind of update, nothing. It's like there's nothing there, no page. It's asking me to re-sign in and re-verify and all this stuff. So that's where I
Weird.
am right now. Yeah, it's so strange. And then
Huh.
like from my personal Twitter account, I can search for the fire caves and I can find it. So it's there. All of our stuff up to episode 24 is there, but everything else, nothing. And it's
Huh.
pretty upset because there was, yesterday was Federation Friday, and so I was trying to post a bunch of stuff for it, and doing tributes and everything else to certain characters and everything else, and had to do it all from my personal page, not from the Fire Caves page. So very upsetting, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to get it figured out. I have sent in various requests and done all those things, so hopefully we'll be back up and running. But in the meantime, you can still reach us through our Facebook page, of course, which is again the Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. You can also message us there if you want, and then of course you can leave any comments for us on our YouTube videos as well. Now, as always, we say be polite, be courteous. Even if you disagree with something that we said or want to add something or whatever it is, don't be a jerk about it because we'll just, delete it and not pay attention to it. And no one wants that. So, but other than that, just stick with us, find us, follow us, and let us know what you think. Now, as always, I like to do some checking in. How was your week and all that other kind of stuff. And we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So, gonna jump right into it. David, how was your week?
It was fine. Work was interesting. It's been a little up and downy. So like it was dead for a couple days at work, and then today was a great day at work. Big sales, great day. It's just funny sometimes, and it was not my own store even that was having a good day. Like other stores were having a good day too. Like I was trying to call other people and talk to them about stuff, and they weren't available. It was like okay, they're busy, which is great. Um, Other than that, life is going like normal. So yeah, how are you?
Okay. I'm doing well. Everything is pretty stable here, so no major updates, which is great because like I said, lots to talk about tonight. That is all Trek related. But yeah, we're good. We're great. Kids okay. We have started birthday season once again. This is something that I have mentioned a few times on our show. But first time I've actually got to do it live with everybody, of course. For those of you that might be interested who don't remember or whatever, my family, all of our birthdays all fall within a few weeks of each other towards the first of the year. My older sister and I kick it off with our birthdays, right at the end of February. And then from February to like April 15th, it's just nothing but birthdays. My mother's birthday was today. My uncle's birthday is tomorrow. My daughter's birthday is Monday. And then there's a smattering of other people who, there's just, again, March 12th, March 15th, March 25th, and then so forth. And then my nephew finishes everything out for us with his birthday on April 5th. So, yeah, we're just like, I don't know how we did it. I don't know what was going on in the cosmos or for our family, but for some reason, there's like 50 of us, and all of our birthdays fall within these weeks here. So
Right.
we call it birthday season. But
Nice.
yeah, but other than that, I mean, just kind of the endless. Oh, whose birthday is it? Oh, okay, we're gonna go here now. Okay, we gotta do like that, But once
Yeah.
all that settles, we're good. But that's it. So we're in the middle of that now. We're in the
Yeah.
middle of that
Yeah.
now. as I said, a lot to talk about tonight, and I'll have to get to the first thing, which is unfortunately bad news. Um, it's been announced that Star Trek Discovery, its fifth season, will be its final season. The show has been canceled. The So for those of you who've also been keeping up, you know that Discovery has been on hiatus since 2021, and so now the fifth season is going to be released in 2024. So even though they've already
Wow.
filmed it and it's done, they said they're going back and doing some post-production touch-ups and trying to make sure that it is a proper send-off for the show. There's all kinds of speculation as to whether or not this was planned. Most evidence seems to point to it not being planned. One of the major things that's contributing to that story is the fact that a lot of the actors were on one of the Star Trek cruises that they do when they got the announcement. They were like sitting down
Mm,
with fans and panelists and stuff and were talking and got the announcement as they were talking about how much they loved the show and couldn't wait for it to continue and to resume everything else. And then, here comes a phone call. Hey, guess what? You're not. You're not continuing.
mm. Wow.
So that show has been canceled. Another bit of bad news is the Section 31 show that has been talked about for years is most likely not going to happen. This is because the show that has been, again, in development for the past, I believe, 6 years, maybe even longer than that, has all been focused around the actress Michelle Yeoh, who played Emperor Georgiou, also Captain Philippa Georgiou on the first season of Star Trek Discovery. And since that time in the development, her career has really taken off. She was always pretty prolific as it was, and she was a
Right.
pretty big grab for Discovery in the first place.
Yeah.
But since then, she's won several Oscars. She's got an Academy nod. She's got Golden Globe. She's got all these things that have just really kind of propelled her, and
Yeah.
it's getting to the point where both availability and money are going to make it more than likely a non-doable project anymore.
Right.
It's kind of one of those situations where they just simply, waited too long. They
Right.
talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. Meanwhile, I mean, it wasn't like she was just going to sit on the sidelines and do nothing, waiting for
Right.
them to make up their minds or whatever. And now she's gotten to a point where she's got, some real
Clout.
hardcore star power. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
she was always a prolific actress. This is not to say that she wasn't already doing things, but now with the Golden Globes wins and the Academy nods and all the other kind of stuff, her profile is bigger than it's ever been. So trying to get an actress like that to go to the small screen is exceedingly difficult, especially
Yeah.
when they're at kind of that apex of their stardom, right? So yeah, I just don't see it happening. There's also a lot of speculation that seems to agree with me that it's just not going to happen. So they're either going to have to retool that entirely or just shelve it. Now, Star Trek Picard is obviously in its third and final season. There have been hints, whispers, whatever, of potential spin-offs for certain characters and so forth, but absolutely nothing definite, nothing concrete. That is all 100% speculation. So if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, Worf's finally getting his show," as much as I would love for that to happen, there is no truth to that. I've done all of the research I could in the time that I've had, and there is absolutely no truth to that. In fact, there's no truth really beyond talks, just like kind of idle musings of any of them from the Picard series getting a spinoff. So if you're
Right.
hearing any of that, otherwise, don't count on
I'm
it.
still thinking that Riker should have had something, but oh
I
well.
mean, I could definitely see that, and with the popularity of Seven of Nine, I really, if there was any character that would kind of branch out from Picard, I think that it's her. She's been the most consistent from the beginning of Picard, except for, of course, Jean-Luc himself. But she's
Right.
been the most consistent secondary character throughout all the seasons, and her character maintains a lot of popularity. So if there was going to be anything geared around anybody, I could see that being her.
Right.
um, but nothing else for anyone else. Strange New Worlds is also on a bit of a hiatus, but they should be returning in, I believe it's 2024 as well, with their next season. That would mean that after Picard ends and then after Discovery ends, the only new shows will be um, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy, which means two of the three shows will be animated shows, and one of them obviously geared towards small children. Now, I've watched Prodigy; it's not that bad, but again, is it my go-to Trek? Of course not, because it's geared towards 9 and 10 year olds.
Right.
It's not going to be something for me. Now, Lower Decks, on the other hand, is definitely for adults, but it's more of that humorous side, which I can appreciate, but I like the more serious bent of Trek in general. So
Right.
again, that's also not going to be my go-to. I have been enjoying Strange New Worlds as well, but I'm really tired of prequels and the retconning that has to go into a lot of prequels because of the fact that they have to fit that they are in this time period that that future past
Right.
that we've already kind of seen and whatever else. So and it's got such a fixed point in the Star Trek timeline because we know that it's before Kirk and and that group and everything else. So there's a lot of things in there that you know I'm tired of worrying about. I really just want to see a Star Trek show that is once again forward focused and all new and all of that. So um, you know, I'm hoping that they do come up with something else. There's been talk of a show that's going to be based around Starfleet Academy. Again, not really sure where they're going to land on that. Again, most of that is just talk, but we'll see. Everything keeps saying stay tuned, but I really just want them to do a show that's back in that vein of exploration, deep space, strange new world. Not strange new worlds, but going out, to boldly go. All that. I want that again. And
Right.
we it doesn't seem like that's the route that they're going anymore. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of sad, because of the fact that Star Trek did seem to have such a boom. Like I even said last week, Star Trek seemed to be in a bit of a renaissance there with all the new stuff that they were doing, and now they've kind of like killed all of it.
Mm.
And um, there was a comparison about how Discovery, even though it will have a fifth season, it will only be 65 episodes because seasons have gotten shorter and shorter. Discovery is averaging anywhere from 13 to 15 episodes a season. Picard only has 10 episodes a season, and
Right.
Strange New Worlds is, I think, it's the same. It's like 13
Right.
episodes a season, something like that. So there was a comparison done that was saying if you were to stack them up, in order for if you were to keep that rate going, 13 episodes a season, Discovery would have to run for 22 years in order to have the number of episodes that Next Generation had. That's crazy. And then when people argue about the show and how it's so drama heavy and it's just always so everything is a traumatic event and whatever else, I blame them because the same people who complain about it are the same ones who always complained about filler episodes, and how there was all these episodes that seem to go nowhere. Bottle episodes is another term for them. They go nowhere, they do nothing to advance the plot, whatever it is, but they were essential to filling out character and understanding the tone of the overall show and the setting and things like that. And
Right.
when you eliminate all of those and distill the show down to nothing but core pivotal moments, then after a while you're desensitized to what you're seeing and it doesn't flow for you anymore. And I think that's exactly why Discovery is struggling is because it needed more filler episodes because right around the time that you felt like you understood or were connected to a character in any particular way, they were gone. They died or they, were promoted or moved on or whatever it was. We didn't have 4 or 5 episodes, which equated to 4 or 5 weeks of us sitting with and getting to know the characters and so forth and all that. All that was done away with.
Right.
So, the same detractors talk about the show being too dramatic, or the same ones talk about the bottle episodes, and now they've killed the show. And last thing I want to say before, because I know I've kind of like hogged all of this, because I've been thinking about this for quite a while, and it's been very upsetting. Anybody who says that Michael Burnham is not a great captain and doesn't fit with the other ones is wrong. I was going to say something else, and I'll just stick with you're wrong. And the reason that I feel that you're wrong is because that is the same nonsense that was leveled at Benjamin Sisko, that was labeled at Catherine Janeway. Heck, that was even labeled at Jean-Luc Picard when he first stepped onto the scene. No one could believe it. What? How is the show going to succeed with a French English captain? How's this black man going to lead the? How's this woman going to like? That was always the objection every time, and every single time, each of them later on became like, "Oh my God, they're so amazing. That's my captain. No, that's my captain. Like this is the best captain." Like every single one of them. Heck, they erected a statue to Janeway in Indiana because the character is seen as so pivotal and phenomenal
Oh
in
wow.
storytelling. I mean, a legitimate statue. You can go there yourself. You can
Huh.
look it up right now. You can go. There is a statue of Janeway, the fictitious character. All right. So don't tell me that these characters don't matter, that they're not in, that they don't have impact and importance. Just because you didn't particularly like them, just because you didn't particularly understand them, doesn't mean that they weren't good and effective leaders. Burnham is incredibly intelligent. She is very quick to action. She supports her crew. She supports her people. She doesn't hide away from her traumas or anything like that. She lets people kind of experience that and gain understanding through her, something that none of the other captains did. A lot of them
Right.
suffered in silence. Picard deeply traumatized by his Borg experience, and the only person he ever talked about that with was his brother and Deanna. The other, and she was the counselor, she was counselors, the others kind of sort of knew, but no one really got to see him really struggle with it because he did it privately. Burnham, on the other hand, when she was having her issues, she definitely discussed that openly. She let people know she was having a problem, but that she was trying to work through it. And it made them closer to her, it made them connect with her, and it made them a better crew. So, again, if you think that she doesn't fit, you're wrong. And I believe that not only her character, but also Discovery will stand the test of time. And 15, 20 years from now, I bet you anything, everybody be like, this was an underappreciated show and it should have gotten more than it got when we had it on. Can we bring it back? Blah, blah, blah. All the same crap that we say about Enterprise and all the rest of them will be saying it about Discovery. Mark my words. Uh,
Oh
sorry.
wow, you worked yourself to a sweat, did you?
I've been thinking about it because I mean, as soon as I saw the announcements about the show being officially canceled, all the detractors, finally can't believe it lasted this long. The show had these problems, that problem. Oh my gosh! And I mean, seriously, you can do a search right now, pick up anything about Discovery and see all the negative comments about it, and then do a search for Next Generation when it first came out in the 80s. And if you just take out Next Generation and put Discovery, it's almost verbatim the same stuff. So it's crazy to me that people are so blind to that because Next Generation is like the cornerstone show. It saved the franchise. As much as we loved the original series and Kirk and Spock and all them, if it wasn't for Next Generation, you certainly wouldn't have had any of the movies. You wouldn't have had Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, any of the stuff, the games, any of you wouldn't have any of it, but it's the exact same stuff, and it just kills me when people don't recognize that. And that's why I stand by Discovery. I stand by that work. And if you didn't like the episode, or if you didn't feel like it fit your life or whatever it is, fine. Not everything is for you. You don't walk every facet of life. You don't live every avenue of life. Just because it doesn't fit yours at that time doesn't mean it shouldn't be shown. Everybody's different. Everybody has a right to representation. And it kills me when people are like, nope, not gonna do it. There was a whole thing about there was an episode where a guy was he wasn't even in the like show. I mean, he was on the show, but he wasn't like a central character. He was just in the wheelchair rolling down the corridor, and there was this whole blow up online about them showing a disabled person in a wheelchair on a futuristic show. Disabled people wouldn't exist in the future. This is ridiculous. Why is he in a wheelchair? Meanwhile, Geordi the Force, blind man, piloting the ship and powering the engines on Next Generation, and everybody loves him.
And Deep
Come
Space
on.
Nine, Deep Space Nine had a character. Was you remember the that scientist chick who her gravity on her planet was different? And
Yes, exactly. She had to roll around in a wheelchair, except when she was in her quarters, and she had the anti-grav unit that
was
she
that
could
season one
float
or
around.
two? I feel like that was season two.
I feel like that was season 2 as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Star Trek has frequently featured people who were just different. Nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with the fact that the guy's in a wheelchair. And why do you think that there wouldn't be people in wheelchairs in the future? Yes, medical technology has advanced considerably, but it doesn't mean that we have somehow magically solved every single thing. You don't know why he's in the wheelchair. Maybe there was an accident. Maybe it was a genetic disorder and he was born that way. Maybe there was any number of things that happened to this individual that landed them in a wheelchair. Doesn't make him any less valid. Doesn't mean he can't still work and contribute to society. Doesn't mean he wouldn't be on a spaceship. So calm down. It just things like that upset me so much. It's okay that someone is different than you. Okay? Just relax. Just chill for a minute. Jesus, if it's not your particular okay, fine, fine. You're not in a wheelchair. That's great. I'm glad you got full function of your body. Um, Move on. Go do something. Go climb a tree. I don't know. Do something else. Just now, for those of you who kind of agree with me, I apologize for the rant. I've been holding this in since this announcement has come through. So I apologize for taking over the show in this manner, but I just needed to get that off my chest because man, it's infuriating. We might come back to this in a Fire Caves After Dark. I don't know. But there, I'm gonna let it go now. So David, on to what we were really here about, the final episode of the
Of
third
season
season.
three. Yeah.
Finally, finally, finally getting here. Would you like to give our recap?
I'm gonna give you a chance to breathe. So yeah, I'll do it. All right, guys. So again, this episode is called The Adversary. And we start the episode off with a wonderful, lovely scene with our former commander, Benjamin Sisko, having a promotion ceremony to captain. And his son, Jake, is the one who pins on the new pip on his neck there. During the presentation, and everyone's congratulating Cisco. Ambassador Krasinski comes up to him and mentions that, hey, turns out that the Zintheki, an alien race with they've been in a war with the Federation in the past, have had a coup and they've overthrown their ruler, and the Federation wants the Defiant to go out and make sure that they aren't going to start reinitiating hostilities. And so Cisco, shortly thereafter, gets the crew together on the ship, and they go out to uh, basically make sure that nothing's getting out of hand with the Zintheki. However, during this trip, things start going wrong. Before the ship leaves, O'Brien hears movement in the background in the engine room. When the ship first leaves the dock, he sees Bashir moving around in the Jeffrey tubes. Bashir says he was connecting one of his devices to the power grid. But soon thereafter, shortly after they receive a message from someone saying that the Zintheki are starting to attack them. And shortly after, they lose control of the ship entirely. And they don't, O'Brien doesn't initially know what's going on, but they discover that there are these kind of like living things in the ship that are like connecting and like basically messing up the whole way the ship works, and they have no control over it. Not only do they have no control of it over the ship, but it starts doing things outside of their control, like powering up, weapon systems, and it cloaks the ship, and basically the ship starts taking like aggressive actions without the input of the crew. Um, O'Brien and Dax realize that the place where they first realized that there was a problem with the ship and losing control of the ship, that area was giving off certain particles. So they go around to all the members of the crew and scan them for these particles. And when they get to the Ambassador Krasinski, it turns out he's not a humanoid. He's a changeling, and he zips up into the AC, and escapes. And so now our crew is in a dangerous situation. They can't control their ship. There's a changeling on the ship who has basically gotten them in this situation by telling them to go out here. And they are in a position where they might be the ones who actually initiate a war with the Zintheki, because their ship is basically looking like it's going to attack someone without them being able to control it. Long story short, and I'm again simplifying here, they are able to regain control of the ship with O'Brien eventually, after a fight between Odo and the changeling in the what's the warp core room, basically.
The
Other
engine,
things
yeah.
happened, including at one point, it turns out that Dr. Bashir had been imprisoned in the brig, and the Dr. Bashir that they thought they were working with was actually the changeling, and he nearly gets the Michael Eddington, the like second in command for security. They almost throw him in the brig, but they realize it's Dr. Bashir that's in the brig, and Bashir they thought they were talking with was actually the changeling. Anyway, Odo fights the changeling, um, and kills the changeling, which is a big deal because not only has Odo not like he doesn't bring a gun when he does his security work, so he tries to avoid violence with a gun, but he the changelings had told him in the past that they have never ever once hurt each other. So this is the first instance of a changeling supposedly killing another changeling, which I have a commentary on in a moment. But
Okay.
um, uh, Cisco had turned on the auto self destruct sequence in order before they were going to get into hostile territory, or not hostile, but Zedeki territory. He had the self destruct on and basically gave O'Brien 10 minutes to solve the problem. He narrowly solves the problem for our team, and they're able to depower the weapon systems, turn off the auto structure sequence. They end up back at Deep Space Nine, where they realize that Ambassador Krasinski was kidnapped and replaced by the Changeling sometime before this Changeling came to the station posing as the ambassador. And then Odo reveals that the Changeling's last words to him were, "You are too late. We are everywhere." And that ends season 3 of Deep Space Nine.
Our ominous ending.
Yeah.
So, as I said last week, you know, as much as we talked about how last week's episode facets could have been a two-parter, there was a need to get us to this kind of cliffhanger moment before season 4 because um I said that this episode really kind of sets up what Deep Space Nine is going to be about for the rest of the run. We get that here and that foundational work here. And what we're going to see in the kickoff of season 4 just really leans really hard into it. So, for that reason, I think this is a very important, non skippable episode. I know some people can see some things about it may seem a little mundane, at least till you get closer to the end. But there are so many very important things that we pick up on in this episode that if you don't mark them, other things you'll miss out entirely. They won't make sense to you later on.
Right.
So we're going to make sure that we go through some of those tonight, so that those of you who are watching this for the first time, like David, know, hey, this is something you should have paid attention to.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, as always, I'd like to ask you though, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I thought it was a good one overall. I think you're maybe the idea that it's maybe a mundane episode. Like I get it. It's a slow tension episode, kind of a slow
Slow burn.
burn.
Yeah.
It's one of those episodes where the reveal of the changeling happens, I think, before the second commercial break. So it happens pretty early in some ways because you spend a lot of time basically with them trying to figure out what to do, and like they're pairing up with, we have guns that are turned to a stun setting that it won't kill someone, but it'll knock the changeling out. So it's a slow burn.
Mhm, mhm.
But it's part of the reason why it's interesting and different. The idea that the changelings are able to, again, impersonate someone is pretty dangerous. I mean, we got to spend time thinking about how to do this. But I have to say, it made the whole time just think about all of the stories that, or all the things that have a related element. Again, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but the game Among Us is
Mhm.
this game. This episode is an Among Us game, which is a fun game. I've only played it a few times. I think I mentioned it once before when I played it. There was a group of people. I was playing with like 8 or 10 people, and I was the imposter. And there was a group of people for some reason all around this one, task. Because the part of the game is that if you're a real person, you have to complete tasks to fix the ship. But if you're the imposter, you have to fake it. Well, there were like 6 to 8 people all around this one area, and so I ran up, like a normal person, and just hit the kill button. And so someone died in the middle of a crowd. It was great because no one knew who did it. And anyway, just a fun game to play if you ever get a chance to play Among Us. But anyway, like games like Metroid have a similar premise. There's the X Parasite, which can impersonate people, and the premise of the Metroid Fusion is that Samus, the main character, her power armor has been possessed and impersonated by the X Parasite, and all of the people on this space station have been replaced, and so she's having to fight off all these creatures that have been, infested. And then, of course, there's the invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think most people who like horror, and I don't like horror, I just know of the movie and I've seen clips, but and again, I'm sure I've mentioned this when we talked about the changelings in the past, but The Thing, this episode did more than any other episode to do something like The Thing, where they're having to try and figure out who is the imposter, who's the changeling, how do we figure it out, how do we test them, when we discover that one of them is the creature, how do we stop it. I mean, The Thing is a horror movie, so like when they find out that, the alien is the alien, like it'll, the stomach opens up into a giant maw and bites some guy's hands off, and the head pulls off and turns into a spidery creature. We're not going to the horror element with Deep Space Nine. Obviously, they're trying to stay PG for TV. But a lot of similar elements are there. The
Yeah.
testing of the blood, the
Mhm.
um, just anyway. My point
The
is that
suspicion, the end suspicion as to
yes,
who's
and the
doing what, and meanwhile, while they're suspecting everyone, of course, our true saboteur is running amok on the ship.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The
So
one difference though, which I was a little sad, I was a little surprised they didn't really follow up with this very much. We never saw the changeling in this episode ever impersonate an inanimate object. He always impersonated
true.
a person, which is more suspenseful in certain senses. But because the show presents changelings as being able to impersonate physical objects really well, I was surprised that they didn't lean into that for this episode. Like they walk past something and the camera zooms in on it, and then we are like, "Oh no, it's going to attack them!" But that didn't happen. It was always the changeling was impersonating a person, which again
Mhm.
is fine. It was just an interesting choice. So yeah, I think it was fun. It certainly puts the tension on the Dominion and the changelings. That tension is now really rising up because only a few episodes ago we had um, the the Cardassian Obsidian Order and
The
not the
Romulan Tal
Vulcans, the
Shiar.
Romulans. That's it. They were just trying to attack the Dominion, and it turned out that
Mhm.
the Romulan that we thought was a Romulan was actually a changeling. So
Low back.
when Odo says that the guy whispered before he died that we are everywhere, like you've lost, I fully believe it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
we've already seen how well they've infiltrated the Alpha Quadrant, at this
exactly.
point, and so, I mean, it
And
was inevitable that they would get to the Federation.
what's so crazy is I was thinking about this episode before we got on tonight. It was this very season that truly introduced the changelings as a species. It was
Mhm.
only the finale of last season that the Dominion, the Tal Shiar, if I remember correctly,
Mhm.
was it Tal Shiar or
Yeah.
yeah, that were introduced as like the militaristic enforcer arm of the Dominion.
Oh,
We got
no,
introduced to them,
the Tal Shiar are the Romulan
right?
intelligence group.
Well, who are the
You mean
other?
the Jem'Hadar, those are the
That's
foot
it. The
soldiers
Jim
of the
Hadar.
Dominion.
Yeah, and in episode 1 of season 3, that's when Odo ended up being drawn to and visiting with for the first time the changelings on
Mhm.
their home planet, or at least the planet they were on. And now, throughout one single season, they have infiltrated the Alpha Quadrant, and as far as we know, everyone is a changeling. I certainly
Mm.
think that Eddington is. I think Eddington is one. That's my theory because anytime you introduce a character in time for a plot
Right.
twist, he's usually the guy. But anyway, I have no definitive proof. I
Yeah.
feel like he got a lot of screen time this episode, and he would
Yeah,
make
he
a
did.
perfect fall guy for any future. Oh, that's the one. He
And
was
I
the
will
one all along.
and I will tell you, just not to spoil anything from you for you, but um, he always rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah,
Like from the moment that I first saw him, his when we first encountered Eddington, remember he also sabotaged
the
the
the,
Defiant,
the Defiant. Yeah,
and that pissed
on
me
the way
off.
to the Dominion, in as
Yes,
they were going
yes,
to. Yeah,
and that pissed me off, and I've never forgiven him, and I've just never liked his dynamic.
yeah. Well,
So
in this
that's all.
episode, he's
Yeah.
also a suck up.
Yeah, he's very
Cisco.
much he's very much kind of like trying to ingratiate himself with Cisco,
Yeah, O'Brien had
Everybody wants to
said.
be a captain and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. O'Brien had said, it's about time, and like he's walking away, and he turns around and says, "I just want you to know, I agree with O'Brien. It was about time." It's like, homeboy, we met you like one episode ago. What do you mean, like you think it's time?
Right. Yeah, it's like what do you know of any of them? Like you've been here for
Yeah.
maybe 2 minutes and you've already pissed off half the crew. Like go away.
Exactly. So, yeah, he's my fall guy. I mean, I would say it's a little obvious though, so I hope
Mm.
this show doesn't make it too obvious if it is him. But anyway, um, yeah, yeah, it's yeah.
Well, so one of the so it's a couple of things here that I did want to say I want to talk about to make sure that you were aware of because we get a lot here, especially since we're already talking about the Dominion and the founders and changelings and so forth. So there we know that from this episode we know that a high enough setting on the phaser will cause a reaction with the changeling without damaging equipment. We know that anytime that a piece of a changeling is pulled away from
Separated.
the center mass, that it reverts to its gelatinous state. So it doesn't matter if they're pretending to be another person or if they're a tree or a rock or whatever it is. If a piece of them gets pulled off, it's going to turn back into the gelatinous state. Um, we know that changelings don't seem to sweat, apparently. Eddington was sweating quite profusely, and Odo was you know, collected. Apparently, he doesn't
Right.
sweat at all. Okay. Um, so, and we know that these changelings, or all changelings anyway, seem to be way better at changing their shape, especially when it comes to impersonating people, than
Mhm.
Odo is, even to the point that they can fool tricorders. People seem to think that for whatever reason, even if they change their shape, that if you scan them, they're going to still come off as something different or whatever. That may be the case sometimes with Odo, because as he stated, he doesn't have as much um, of an ability to mimic forms the way that others do,
Right.
but he does get inanimate shapes perfect. He says, if you scan me while I'm a rock, you're going to read a rock. And as we saw when Krasinski gets scanned, he read as human than when they
Right.
scanned him. So there
That's
was
true.
nothing about him that would tip anybody off, that he is anything other than what he's presenting to be. So these are all very important things because they come up later on in other episodes, and why, like when they discover, the whole blood screening thing, why that is so important, um, and how Cisco was able to, by default, be in command in that situation when Kira and the Bolian officer and Eddington and Odo all come around the corner and they're standing there and phasers are drawn. It's a very tense moment, but the only person who everybody could agree to trust was Cisco. And why? Because he was bleeding. He'd been hurt by the
Right.
changeling in the
Right.
corridor, which changeling killed that guy. And Cisco just left him up there. Like
Yeah.
now I get it. He's got more pressing concerns or whatever. But I mean, it's just like dead body, and you left him, and you didn't tell anybody that he was
Yeah.
there. Like you could have at
Dead
least
body
said,
in corridor 6A. Yeah.
right, right. That's what I was thinking. He could have been like, I just saw the changeling. He's on his way to wherever, and medical emergency. Beam so and so to wherever. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe he could have been saved or something. We don't know. He just left him.
Yeah.
I was like, good lord, man. Like, take care of the guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, all those things are going to be important. And I always felt like the scene where they're doing the first round of blood screenings and Bashir is slowly plugging in the tubes and removing the tubes and shaking the tubes and all this stuff. I was like, even first time watching it, I was like, Bashir's the changeling. Like it just he radiated subterfuge, right? He was like, everybody else is so tense, and he's standing there and he's like smirking while he's doing it, and he's just so methodical. I was like, dude, you look off in this scene, and then of course we find out that that's because he's supposed to be the changeling here. So definitely works. But I did like that, like the whole holding it up, and then all of a sudden the gelatinous mass moves.
Right.
Like, yeah, of course, of course. You
Yeah.
know, but what did you think of that? Whatever that was supposed to be, the program, the parasite, whatever, that is just making the tendril connections throughout the ship all on its own, and it's protected by a force field, so of course no one can stop it. And Dax
Yeah.
conveniently gets knocked out and doped up, so she's no good to anyone anymore. And
She's never been
yeah,
any good to anybody on this show, apparently.
I swear I feel like it's just that's gonna be the recurring problem when her and O'Brien have to work
Yeah.
together. There becomes a reason that they have to separate them because
Right.
they're both too good at their jobs, and if you have them both together, there's no reason why it shouldn't succeed. Someone has to be incapacitated, and frequently
Yeah.
it's Jadzia.
Hey, Frank, we need some tension in this scene. I don't know. Why don't we knock Dax out again? Yeah.
Mhm. Let's lay her out. And Kira hits it right on the head. She even says it. Oh, that's going to make O'Brien's job a lot harder without Jadzia. Yeah, we knew that.
I
We
just
knew
love that
that.
that the changeling knocked out her and then left her. I mean, didn't knock out O'Brien too. Like
Right.
apparently, like not just Dax. That's it. I mean, and of the two of them to knock out, if you knew anything, which apparently this changeling didn't know enough, you would knock out O'Brien, not Dax. Not that Dax maybe couldn't save the day, but like Dax, I'm sorry, O'Brien is the chief engineer. Dax
Right.
is backup to him at the very least. But yeah, and then
Yeah,
the
I
real
would agree with that.
Bashir.
That's
Go ahead.
interesting.
Yeah,
I never thought about that before, but that's an interesting assessment. That's true. If you are truly trying to sabotage the ship and make it so that it's as hard as possible to solve the problem, then why wouldn't you take out the engineer first?
I mean that's why I thought for a time that O'Brien was the imposter because I thought we'd already seen him alone hearing noises. Um, he was in the Jeffries tubes, same thing. He's the only one that wasn't knocked out. Like for me, the suspicion was on O'Brien. That's why when it was Bashir, I thought it was a good twist that yeah, the changeling had basically somehow pricked himself, I guess, during the
Hmm.
pricking of Eddington. It was actually Bashir because I think that scene is a little slow by the way that they're drawing the blood. Like they edited
Yeah.
it to be kind of
th-
slow, but I
And
didn't necessarily think it was Bashir per se. I just at that point I was like, I don't know who it is. Just waiting
that's
for
the
this
only.
episode to
I,
keep going.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna. That's exactly why I thought that it was O'Brien, or not O'Brien, but Bashir, because it was taking too long. He was far too slow in doing everything. Like I feel like for a doctor, there would be more practice in
yeah,
changing those things out, and he was
maybe.
just
Yeah,
so slow with it, and the scene was so quiet, and you're focused on everything. I was like, he's the change. It never occurred to me that it was anybody else.
right. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that they would take out Dax and not O'Brien because he's the one who's going to be, the hands-on guy that truly fixes the issue. And he,
yeah,
and why not knock out both of them? He had the opportunity because Dax and O'Brien were working together. No one else was watching them. And then that's why he was able to get to Dax in the first place because they separated. They were working together, and then O'Brien admits that he left her alone just for a minute and she got knocked out. Why didn't, upon knocking out Jadzia, why didn't he immediately move to O'Brien and take him out too? He was
right.
also alone and he was more vulnerable than ever because Jadzia, the only person who was supposed to be watching him, had already been incapacitated. So
And
it would
that
have made the most sense to knock them both out.
right, and that brings up for me the thing about the whole like, all right, team, we're gonna pair up and don't keep your don't let your partner out of your sight. Y'all are idiots. If the one of them's a changeling and he suddenly gets the upper hand on his partner, then that partner is already out
Hmm.
decommissioned, and suddenly the changeling's loose. You got to have at least three people, if not better, four, working together. That way, it's really hard for any one person to not have like to get
A
out
set
of
of
the.
eyes.
Yeah, someone can
Hmm.
keep an eye. Like, all right, you're gonna enter the Jeffries tube while all three of us watch you, and then we're gonna all watch the second person. And like, if they were working more coordinated, instead they were just like, all right, team, we're effed
Right.
basically. Eddington basically says, we're screwed. There's no way we can do this in that one meeting they have. Which again, Eddington,
Which,
yeah, I don't know about you, buddy.
but
I
it
mean, that
also kind
whole
of
like I'm
makes.
sweating and you're not thing with Odo is a perfect cover because they didn't
Oh, and
actually
I
bring that up. They didn't actually bring that up as the reason
no,
why they figured out that the changeling was the person because they never used that again. So anyway, keep going.
no, but we're going to talk about that scene in just a second. But I did want to say also that they do mention the fact that there's only 47 people on board the ship, and then
Which is
on
a
top of that
lot.
40. I felt like that was too it was too few. I felt like there should have been
Really?
more. Like I was surprised there was only 47. I was like,
I thought the
the
Defiant was like a small like stealth fighter ship, and then suddenly
it
they're
is
shooting plasma beams way
well,
down the corridor and
it is a
way down the corridor.
it is a small ship relative to say the Enterprise,
Well, that's what I
but
mean, though. Is like
but
it
it's
suddenly
still a
felt as big
big
as the
ship.
Enterprise.
Right.
Yeah,
But, I mean, it's still a big ship, and I mean, if I remember correctly, the operational crew complement is 80 to 85, but they
right,
have additional space to carry at least like 120 people on the ship. So the fact
wow,
that if they have an operational capacity of 85, but they've only got 47, that means they left the station with a little more than half of what they needed to operate the ship safely. Then on
right,
top of that, they confined a bunch of people to their quarters, so they had even fewer people to operate these teams with to scan the whole ship. So they
right,
really handicapped themselves a lot by not having enough people on board to conduct an effective search. Now,
right,
granted, this was not supposed to in their head was not supposed to be a mission that was going to end this way,
right.
but still, I feel like Cisco should have done a better job and at least left with 60, not 47,
Well,
60. Give
I
yourself more
honestly
people.
thought the ship only held at most like 20, or at least like the
Oh,
crew was like 20. So when they're saying there's 47, that's double the amount. And again, the ship when they're exploring it, trying to find the changeling, let me put it this way: I thought the Defiant was at best like a quarter the size of the Enterprise, maybe even
mhm.
smaller. But in this episode, they're saying it's at least half the size of the Enterprise. I would say, like, not officially. I'm just giving you
No,
my
I don't even
feeling
think
of
that
it.
it's. I wouldn't even say that it's half the size. Like I get what you're saying. Like the way it's presented, you would think that the ship is bigger. But if
Right.
I'm remembering the ship specs correctly, then yeah, I'm trying to like if you picture the Enterprise D, right, and you got that big saucer, right, then
Hmm.
basically the Defiant is really the shape of the bridge on the saucer, and then it's got all the decks. So yeah, it's small. It's small because the saucer section is huge on
Well, and
the
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 Enterprise
D.
holds like 1,000 people, so I guess I'm still I'm
Yeah,
overstating the size of it. I guess in my
yeah,
head, but
yeah,
still, again, my point is that whatever size I thought the ship was before, they doubled it in this episode. They
yeah.
doubled
Okay,
the size in
okay.
my mind, and
So
I thought
I
it was
think
yeah,
we'll get into that too. We're gonna definitely talk about ship specs at some point later on because the Defiant is obviously going to become a very key point of this show going forward.
yeah,
But now I did want to return to that scene with Eddington and Odo in the corridor shooting phaser blasts down the Jeffries tube. Eddington says some things here that really kind of just rubbed me the wrong way, and once again just one of those. This is why I don't like this guy moments. So to set the scene for you, for those of you who didn't watch it or whatever it is, they're crawling through these Jeffrey shoes. They're looking for the changeling. They're shooting down these bolts to these blasts of phaser fire to draw out the changeling. And Eddington is sweating, Odo is not. Eddington says, "Hey, do you ever sweat?" And he's like, "No, I don't." And he tells him it's the phaser rifle, the superheated plasma heating up the ambient atmosphere. That's why you're sweating. And then Eddington says to him, if you were changing, what would you do? Where would you be?
Right.
Can't you think like him? And he's like, no, I can't think like him. And he's like, well, he's one of your people. Can't you, you know, put yourself in his shoes, in his head, think like he doesn't? And Odo's like, no, to be quite honest, I don't understand my people very well. And he's actually sad about it in that moment that he doesn't understand
Yeah.
his people that well. But
Yeah.
I always felt like it was a very, that's a, well, point blank, it's a racist thing to say for Eddington to be like, he's one of you, think like him. I mean, hell, we're all human and none of us think the same. Like you might get
Right.
some general things right about, a group of people or even an individual might get certain general things right. But to think that you can actively put yourself in the head of, or in the shoes of another person and know exactly where they're going to be, come on. No
Right.
one can do that. I mean, if we just turned that scene around and they were hunting some crazy human madman who had broken onto the ship. And Odo had said, "Yeah, Eddington, he's human like you. Why don't you think like him? Where would you go if you were a psychopathic assassin killer?"
Right.
You'd be like, "Wait a second, you know, d- yeah, don't say things like that."
Right.
And it just kind of shows how that fear and the tension of the moment kind of brought out an element of xenophobia in Eddington here, and
Right.
all of a sudden he's got this fear of the other and he's projecting it onto this other person who's actively trying to help him. So
Right.
I was just like, yeah, don't like this guy at all. You've really solidified it. Like your first act on the show, I didn't like you. Now you've continued and now you've insulted my favorite character. Yeah, I don't like you at all. Like
Right.
just go away.
So
So
I'll just push back just a little bit by saying that I because Odo as a changeling is able to do things obviously that humanoids cannot. I can understand someone questioning him, but it's certainly, I mean, like, oh, Odo, are you dumb enough to not have thought to suggest something? That's kind of how I take it. Like, Odo's committed to doing his job and to stopping the changeling and finding out what's going on. If he had a suggestion to make as a changeling, I'm a changeling. I would expect him to do this. He would have already done that. You're in the middle of, basically sweating in the middle of a corridor. So you're suddenly wanting to come up with a reason to talk, I guess. Yeah, it was a dumb question, but I would say not just because the racist element per se, but more like the you don't think Odo would have said something by now? That's how I take it, at least.
I mean, I think there's that too. I mean, Odo has demonstrated again and again that he isn't like the other changelings that we've encountered.
Right,
And for Eddington, again, the outsider, to come along and question him is also kind of upsetting because it's like, okay, you're very far down the chain of command, and
right,
everybody else trusts Odo, and they've brought him along because they trust Odo, and they know that he is doing his utmost to help them and support them and protect them. So for
right,
you to come along and question that at any point is unacceptable.
right.
If you've got questions, to me, I would say if you have questions about Odo's loyalty and whether or not you can trust him, you need to direct those to your
Cisco.
commanding officer
Yeah,
because Cisco is the one who put him in charge. So if you want to know something about Odo, go to Cisco, go to Kira, she's the first officer, go to somebody else who put that person in command,
right,
not you as soon as you get the opportunity, turn around and blast in his face how much you don't trust him or you're at least suspicious of him and
right,
his
right.
people and whatever else. Yeah, that just again rubbed me the wrong way. I did not like that scene at all. And again, just further, just this is why, Eddington, yeah, I, you get what I don't no spoilers, but I'm just saying, makes sense. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say.
All right, all right.
All right, that's it.
Again, for me though, it was like the hey, you're bringing up the whole sweat issue as a way to maybe find the changeling, and we never actually used that explanation. So for me, the question was, first off, why didn't we, if we're gonna, do the Chekhov's gun, if you mention something in the first act and you usually bring it up later on as a in the third act, but that wasn't brought up. So either they're gonna bring it up for a future episode as something else to reveal. Again, maybe Eddington is a changeling, but he's better about hiding it, kind of thing, or it was just kind of a throwaway moment, which I can't think that that would be the reason that happened. So
Hmm.
I'll be curious to see if they follow up on that point.
All I'll say is we'll see. We'll see. Well, instead of final thoughts on this episode, do you have any besides Eddington? Because I feel like we've kind of circled him a couple of times here.
Sure.
Um, Projections as to what we're going to see coming into season 4. Now that the changelings have kind of leveled this threat. You're too late. We're everywhere. What are some things that you either think that we're going to see or would hope that we do see coming into season 4?
Well, I'm glad Cisco is a captain now.
Yes.
Frankly, I don't know how you can be the commander of a star base in a hostile territory without that kind of level of authority. Frankly, heck, even an admiral seems warranted on
Okay.
some level.
Okay,
But
pause. I have to say, just real quick, I've thought about that for a long time, and I believe for my in universe, and there's absolutely nothing about this that backs it up at all. But here's what I've always figured: the reason that he was made a commander first and then later promoted was because I feel like Starfleet was testing him to see if he had sorted himself out. Considering
sure,
he was a commander when he was, on the Saratoga, he lost his wife, he was raising his child, and he had really gone, deep into his PTSD and had isolated himself from everything. And he was
right,
even considering retiring and going into civilian service. We found all that out in the very first season, in the first episode. And so
right,
I feel like Starfleet needed the job to be done, but they didn't want to give it to somebody who may check out on them at some
right,
point. So I feel like this is a great way to test him and make sure he was kind of up to snuff and okay with things. And that's
right,
why it was, a 2 to 3 year run here. Once they saw all the things that he handled, also his significant importance to the Bajoran people and how he handled their civil uprising and the circle and
right,
Minister Jaro and all those things, and they saw that he came out on top again and again. I think they finally were like, "Look, okay, he's proven himself. The guy's ready for it," and gave it to him. So that's
right,
why I've always been okay with it because I didn't like it either. It's like he's the
right.
station commander; he should be the captain. But to
Yeah,
me, that made sense. They needed to test him a little bit. So, okay.
yeah. I think as an explanation that it works. I think it is flawed. I mean, as you said, it's not an in-universe explanation. It just kind of is. And for example, I guess part of it for me is like also he just kind of is captain now, but it's not really explicitly said why. It's just he got promoted, and like again, like
That's true.
O'Brien says, I think he deserves it. He's certainly been, he's been doing
Doing
the
the job.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's like, and if your point is like they wanted to test him and make sure he's actually worth it, fine. I don't have a disagreement with that. I'm just saying that I don't see how his authority quite yet is truly any different than what he was before. Actually, I
Right.
should mention it was a funny scene when Kira comes up to him and says, "Hey, am I gonna have to stop coming up and arguing with you?" And he says, "No, it just means my opinion is just always right," or
Yes,
something like
I'm
that.
never wrong. He says it
Yeah,
just means I'm never wrong.
yeah. So it was a great little repartee between them. Um, but yeah, I'm just wondering how is Cisco's authority truly promoted? Other than a
Okay.
pip on his shoulder, is
How
he
does he
truly
change? How does he grow with the role? Or
well?
does he grow with the role?
Not even him as an individual. I just want to know what has Federation actually done to for Cisco? What have they done on his behalf? Have they just
Oh,
is
like
it
what does that mean? Him being a captain now versus the commander of the
right?
station.
Is it just a shiny little thing on his lapel, or does it mean something? Does it actually
Right.
refer to something? Can he now call up an inner? Can he call up a ship and say, "I need you here,"
Hmm.
as opposed to before he was just basically the repairman on the way to some better place, just
Okay.
the rest stop. He was the gas station attendant. Now, does he have any authority to command anybody really? I mean, other than the station, which he already had, what else is new? So I
Okay.
trust though that the show will actually give us something there. Maybe not this episode directly, but
Mhm.
something
Okay.
will have to be different, I imagine, as we go forward. I mean, you seem to be indicating that next episode, starting of season 4, is going to be a whiz bang episode, so I'm
Man,
looking forward to it.
I cannot wait. I have been waiting for this episode since we started this show.
ah, you,
Okay.
you get my
I
hopes up,
cannot
man. It's the
wait.
wrong thing.
I know. I really shouldn't be. I really shouldn't be saying it, but all I know is like
Yeah.
as many times as I've watched this show, whenever I'm doing something, I'm just kind of like just want to have something to watch or whatever. This is this
One of those
this is one of the
episodes.
first episodes that I go to.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's great. I feel like it's just got a great energy. It just kind of like it feels like there's a change to me anyway. Just like it feels like the show has changed here, and I hope you feel it too when you watch it. And I don't want to build it up any more than that because I love it. I do love it, and there will be a
And
lot to talk about on that one.
speaking of change, do they change the suit or at least Cisco's outfit? I mean, does he?
So
I mean, it looks
yes,
like the V part is deeper.
there are well, I mean, there were some slight changes to their uniforms, and not just Cisco's. When we go into season 4, pretty much everybody gets a little bit of the Starfleet uniforms get an upgrade, and Kira's uniform gets an upgrade, and as does Odo's. So we will see some differences here. And then, of course, there are some things that really kind of point out those differences, which I'm not going to tell you because they would be spoilers. But you
Mm,
will see them, and you'll be able to look at me like, okay, I know that one, and I know that one. Yes, I can see the difference, and that's all I'm going to say.
okay,
Um, what else? Oh, this is the last time that the theme song that we've been hearing is this particular style. When
mm,
season 4 starts, that there is a change to the theme song. It's a more orchestral cacophonous sound. So if you play through the episode, from beginning to end all the way, don't skip any part of it or whatever, you will notice a change in the theme song when season 4 starts as well.
interesting.
So yeah, also minor other little details that change. If you're watching the opening credits, this episode was the last time that Cisco will be listed as Commander Cisco. So when the new season starts, it'll be Captain. And then don't get confused about names. No one died. Same actor. But this episode, season 3, is the last time that you will see the name Siddig El Fadil on on the roster. It'll now be Alexander Siddig, and that is, of course, Julian Bashir. So just letting you know, he
Huh.
went through a little name change. So I don't want you to suddenly see a new name on there and be like, "What he must have got fired in between the." No, he didn't get fired. He just changed his name.
And a
Same that.
changeling impersonated him for the finale of
Right.
the rest of the
Yeah,
season.
that's
Yep.
what it was.
Yep.
The changeling. Changeling wanted his name back. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's all.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, we are coming to a close here, and I just want to say real quick about Picard. Worf is proving himself to be a badass. So I have enjoyed it. And I wanted to tell you this in particular. There's a moment where I felt like he was channeling his inner Luoxana Choi, and it was cracking me up. Because
Oh, okay.
she's got her whole name. Luoxana Troy, daughter of the fifth house, holder of the
Ah.
sacred rings of Beta Z, heir to the chalice of Reeks, all that, right? She's got that. Well, Worf has one now too, and it's awesome. It's awesome. And when he said it, he's just so proud when he says his whole thing. And I'm just like, yeah, walks on a Troy 100%. Like there's just absolutely all of it. And I was loving it. So
Right.
if I mean, I know that you haven't watched Picard yet, but if you just want to, do a Google search or, YouTube search or whatever, just to see that little part, it's like a minute long tops. But he lists out his accomplishments, and boy, it's awesome.
I feel like because he's gonna show up on Deep Space Nine, like I should wait, not do it. Because if there's anything on
Okay.
Deep Space Nine that comes up there, I don't want to ruin it. But
Actually, yeah. So then, no, don't do that because some of the things he says are direct tie-ins to Deep Space Nine, and you haven't seen them yet. So yeah,
okay,
don't do that.
all right.
But yeah,
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for us tonight. And as always, you guys, you should follow us, find us anywhere that you listen to um, podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. And of course, you can find us as the Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. And we will be back. Um, We'll be back next week, but we will be doing our Trek After Dark, in which we will be discussing The Expanse, Book 3. And then we will also be doing our recap for all of the seasons. That will be the week after that. And then we will be back for season 4. So it looks like 2 weeks out for that. All right. But then we'll be back for season 4 and some special stuff that we've got planned for the opening of season 4 because it's awesome. All right. So until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.